We got Josh. We got John. The crew's back together after a couple weeks of vacations, ready to talk about Perrion Winfrey, who just can't seem to keep Alex Grinch's name out of his mouth. We'll talk about that, plus some playoff baseball, NCAA tournament softball, a lot of good things happening for the Oklahoma Sooners on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Sooners Nation, and welcome to the Monday edition of Locked On Sooners. Thank you for joining me. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. You can also read my work covering the Oklahoma Sooners at thesoonerswire.com. And again, back together, reunited, and it feels so good. Josh Helmer, 94.7 The Ref in Norman. You can hear him Monday through Friday from 9 to noon. You can also follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. Josh, welcome back. Good to have you.
Reunited, and it feels so good. What's up, man? Hope you had a great vacay. Obviously, my vacation was good. We won't bore you with all of the details of our respective vacations, but it is nice to be back. It's good to be doing the podcast together again instead of split up and this and that. So it's great, man. Perrion Winfrey, he's back in the news, back talking about an ex-defensive coordinator for Oklahoma. And while I'm not privy to all of the happenings with Alex Grinch and how this separation totally went down with Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch and everybody that obviously is off to USC now, Perrion Winfrey would be much more in the camp of having knowledge of how all of that went down, John. But it just seems to me, and correct me, Sooner Nation, if you feel that this is not the right take here, but I think it's time for the ceasefire. We get it. Alex Grinch at times maybe could have utilized your skill set a little bit better. I think most of Sooner Nation is ready to move on from this divorce of Lincoln Riley, Alex Grinch. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination saying that all of Sooner Nation is at that point, but that was sort of my first reaction, seeing similar comments from Perrion Winfrey that we've kind of already seen before, John.
Yeah, so to recap, if you've missed it, if you're not on Twitter, you missed the story we wrote over at SoonersWire.com. Perrion Winfrey, in a couple of tweets on Saturday, said, a defensive coordinator that knows what he's talking about, ... I love it here, yoga emoji. And then went on to say, a little bit later in the afternoon, about 4 hours later, I don't know which is worse, the Grinch that stole Christmas or the other one. And Josh, here's kind of my take on what's happening with this. Perrion Winfrey he's just trolling Sooners Nation, to be honest. Like, all of this is about is just having a little bit of fun on social media, getting some likes, some retweets. And, Oklahoma Sooner fans are good for him. That's why Colin Cowherd is constantly keeping Oklahoma in his repertoire of social media posts. And I'm kind of with you. It's like, yes, we get it, Perrion Winfrey. Things could have gone a little bit differently. But let's not forget, as maybe not as consistent as we would have liked the Alex Grinch defense to be during his tenure, it was much better than what it was previously, right? Like, it was historically bad under the previous defensive coordinator. Alex Grinch took that group of players, added a few of his own, recruited pretty well on the defensive side of the football, and made it a lot better. Like, yes, again, it wasn't consistently great, never reached top 10 levels. It's not going to be as good as Brent Venables' defense at Oklahoma coming up in the future, but it was better. Like, it was better. And yes, Perrion Winfrey, it didn't go great, but really you only had one kind of good season for Oklahoma, and this was last year, and it wasn't even that great. Your guy, Nick Bonito, he got drafted in the second round. Brian Asamoah, the third round. I mean, Oklahoma's defenders were getting drafted, maybe not the first round, but who's to say that those guys would have got drafted in the first round under a different defensive coordinator? Maybe if they would have played a year under Brent Venables, that might have changed, but it's hard to say. Like, it's all speculation. And look, I get that Perrion Winfrey has, problems with the previous defensive coordinator. But at some point, man, you gotta take on a small iota of professionalism and just move on. That's really as simple as it is. Like, yes, what happened back in December was frustrating, and we all had a lot of fun, kind of poking fun at Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch when players were coming out and saying some things. But man, that was like 6 months ago, almost 7 months ago now. It's time to just begin moving forward with Brent Venables, with the future of Oklahoma Sooner football, and leave the past in the past. This is the kind of stuff that Oklahoma fans kind of get criticized for on a regular basis by national media, is like not being able to let go. And will we continue to follow Lincoln Riley and USC and have a lot of fun at whenever they lose a game? If they lose a game, sure, we absolutely will. It'll be a fun thing to do. But kind of taking shots about where things were back in in 2021, man, that's so far back. But it's newsworthy, it's noteworthy. People are reading the story, they're looking at what he said. I mean, the tweets had hundreds of thousands of thousands of likes, and I'm sure just as many retweets on Saturday. So yeah, he had a really good engagement on Saturday.
The impressions from those sets of tweets, not bad from Sooner Nation, but I agree with your sentiment. I think really for not even take the Oklahoma angle out of it. Now he's off to the National Football League, and he'll always be an Oklahoma Sooner. And Sooner fans will trumpet his successes at the next level. And Brent Venables in this Oklahoma coaching staff, the social media arm that is Oklahoma, will champion a lot of Perrion Winfrey or any of these Sooners that got drafted, their successes in the National Football League. But as far as the University of Oklahoma for Perrion Winfrey, really something like this, these types of comments, there's just not really a positive to it for him outside of, again, sort of riling up the fan base and getting fans excited about something that at this point, while it's by no means an ancient beef here with Alex Grinch, Lincoln Riley, Jamar Cain, whoever you want to pick, it's an unimportant beef now for Perrion Winfrey. His professional future is no longer tied to what happened with Alex Grinch and Lincoln Riley. So to me, I just kind of look at it and say, is there really a positive for him to be coming out and making any more of these types of comments about Alex Grinch? And where was the motivation from it? Again, behind closed doors, we don't know initially what was said or kind of how that went down. We've got an idea that wasn't an extensive conversation from Lincoln Riley when to the team that, hey, we're up and leaving. And of course there was frustration that, hey, I just found out about this job a couple of hours ago, and yeah, now all of a sudden we're all shipping out in the dead of night. Okay, we've gone over that. We know that that's not how this thing went down with Lincoln Riley, Alex Grinch, any of the coaching staff. That's not how it went down. But for you, Perrion Winfrey, it's just there's nothing to gain from continuing to beat a dead horse here.
So one side of this that I'll kind of argue for Perrion Winfrey is Alex Grinch was more than willing to go into the media and talk about how his players didn't like to practice last fall. I remember that on a couple of occasions at least. And so, hey, maybe Winfrey just didn't take kindly to the coach criticism in the media. And I thought it was an odd thing to say by Alex Grinch, to be like just coming out and say our players just don't like to practice. I'm like, that seems odd to kind of call out your defense when, hey, yeah, it wasn't going great, but it's not all on the players. Sometimes the coaches take part in that too. And Isaiah Coe jumped into the fray as well in response to one of Perrion Winfrey's tweets, throwing up a bunch of laughter emojis after the Grinch that stole Christmas tweet. And Winfrey then called him the career stealer, that's incredibly strong words. And then Isaiah Coe again said the one that stole our season. Brent Venables talked about it when he at the Coaches Caravan about how they use social media to determine how they feel about recruits and players. And I mean, it just doesn't serve you any benefit to come on to social media and criticize a coach. It just doesn't help you. It doesn't help your team to kind of lay those negative seeds and sow those negative seeds. Now it's a former coach, but I mean, there were players last year, kind of hinting at some issues with the current coaching staff at the time. So I don't know. It's just odd. I agree. It's just time to kind of move forward, look forward. And speaking of looking forward, let's talk future schedule because we got some times released for the first 3 games of the Oklahoma Sooners schedule. Got a date change on one of them, and we'll talk about that after I talk to you about BetOnline. BetOnline is the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, UFC fights, boxing fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline is where the game starts.
And thank you, as always, everybody, for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. How about for your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. We've got some scheduling notes.
Yeah, it's exciting. The schedule's starting to come out, which means we are just, right around the corner from the start of football season. And the Oklahoma Sooners will open the season against UTEP. We've known that on September 3rd, but now we know that they will start at 2:30 p.m. with a kickoff on Fox. Josh, tell me your thoughts on the 2:30 kick.
My thoughts are, everybody hydrate. It's going to be hot, right, for the first game of the Brent Venables era versus UTEP. 2:30 on Fox. It's a nice afternoon ticket. From a national television perspective, I can understand why it's getting the 2:30 treatment. And Oklahoma fans, I think, probably like the 2:30 from just a television thought process, like 2:30 better than 11 a.m. Prime time would have been ideal versus UTEP. If you could actually swap these, if you could swap the 2 kickoff times, Kent State for 2:30 and then UTEP maybe at 6 o'clock would be great. Keep UTEP on Fox and then, obviously keep Kent State over on ESPN Plus, but just make it a 2:30 kick, or keep that at 6 o'clock too, right? Would be an ideal world for those first couple of kickoffs. But hey, we know when the Brent Venables era is officially going to kick off, and we're going to get our first look, right, in week 1 at how great this Schmitty conditioning system, this machine for Oklahoma, is it operating to peak in week 1. I mean, it's going to be brutal that first week.
Yeah, and if you follow us on YouTube, maybe you responded to some of the YouTube videos over there, but Jacob Cooksey, he's a UTEP fan, always coming by to offer his thoughts on the Oklahoma Sooner, but he thinks that UTEP is going to give the Sooners a game that week 1. I still think there's no chance. If UTEP is able to cover, that'll be a win for them. But man, Gaylord family, Oklahoma Memorial Stadium is going to be buzzing for that week 1 Brent Venables debut. And I think the defense is going to be fired up, ready to put on display what kind of has been promised at this point. Like, everybody's expecting a better defense than last year, and they're going to be ready to put it in and put their money where their mouth is, actually show up, perform on the field, and show that this is going to be a different Oklahoma Sooners team. And the offense, I think, is going to be humming as well. And then we've got the Nebraska game. Again, 11 a.m. kickoff as part of the big noon kickoff, which has become a staple for the Fox broadcasts. But anytime there's a big game, Fox is always going to make it their 11 a.m. matchup. It's just what it is. But it's also possibly part of the reason why the Oklahoma Sooners are moving to the SEC, to get out of that, that quote unquote prime time spot for Fox and get into a legit prime time spot with ESPN, ABC, with the SEC.
It is a pretty common Big Ten kickoff time, right? They've sort of, before even big noon kickoff with Fox, Big Ten programs, it seemed like, kind of controlled that early 11 a.m. window. And when the game is on the road, it seems like we get less of that backlash from fans, less of that frustration from Sooner Nation with it being an 11 a.m. kick. Sure, you're maybe not totally thrilled about it, but the fact that it's in Lincoln and it's not in Norman, it doesn't affect any of the local commerce for Oklahoma with this 11 a.m. kick. I don't think that we're going to see and feel, and I don't kind of think that we really have yet, that same frustration from this being an 11 a.m. kick.
I think most people were probably expecting it. They were 11 a.m. last year, and of all the times to put them in a prime time slot, the first time they'd played in a decade on the anniversary of the game of the century from 50 years ago, that would have been the time to put them in prime time, or at least in a better time slot. And I think you're right. We don't hear them, people complain about 11 a.m. kicks in Kansas when they play in Lawrence. And honestly, they get a lot of 11 a.m. kicks for the Red River Showdown. That's just kind of how it's been for a lot of years. And so not too surprising there, but maybe one day we'll get to see an Oklahoma rivalry game played in prime time that's not Oklahoma State. Maybe they'll put, the Red River Showdown one time in prime time. That could be a lot of fun. But
I don't think at the Cotton Bowl, if you get it to where it does officially move to Jerry World, then a primetime kick, I think, is a serious possibility if they do that. And I'm trying to think back. So the Big 12 championship game between the two was an 11 a.m. kick as well. Was it not, between OU and Texas?
Maybe. I don't know. That was so many years ago. It's hard to remember that one. It might have been primetime too. Because I know they played Iowa State in primetime, but I don't know. It's hard to keep the schedules right from several years ago. Iowa State, that game was going to be on a Thursday. Now it's been moved to a Saturday. Oklahoma is going to have a full 2 weeks to prepare for that road trip to Ames. I think that's a benefit to the Oklahoma Sooners, but I wasn't really all that concerned about playing them on a Thursday night either. Oklahoma should far and away be the better team, more talented team heading into that game, whether it's a night game in Ames, a Thursday game in Ames, or a Saturday kick. Now I think this has a chance to be an early kick or a midday kick versus a primetime game, even though primetime seems to be a really cool venue in Ames. It wouldn't surprise me to see him playing that one at 2:30 there in October.
Well, and really, if you were going up with the game, which now, of course, as you mentioned, it's gotten shifted out of that, that wouldn't have been a bad spot it's not a quick turnaround for you. You had the bye week in between. Actually, there's sort of an argument to be made. Maybe it's better to have played that game on Thursday instead of the Saturday, just because you've got kind of an extended wait. But probably most fans, again, just the traditional approach of playing a game on Saturday versus having to have a Thursday primetime kick. I'm sure fans are happy that it is not that Thursday kick, but I actually think you could, again, make a decent counter argument that maybe it was more beneficial for OU to play that game on a Thursday night with the bye week in between. But I think, again, most people are happy that it's going to wind up being a Saturday kick.
Yeah, it was going to work out pretty well for them, actually, to have a week and a half and then a week and a half between dates. So that would have been kind of interesting as well. But we'll have more times come out later on in the summer and during the season, and we'll touch on those as the season goes along. We're May 29th now. They open on September 3rd. We're a little over 3 months away, and it seems like those 90 days won't go fast enough before Oklahoma Sooners football kicks off the 2022 season and the Brent Venables era of football. Coming up next, we've got the Oklahoma Sooners softball team advancing in the NCAA tournament to the College World Series. The baseball team winning the Big 12 tournament. We'll talk about that on the other side of the break. So, Josh, Oklahoma Sooners softball dominates UCF in the Super Regional, outscoring them 15-1 They got a run rule win on Friday, 8-0 behind Hope Troutwine's no-hit performance. And again, the Sooners just mashing opponents. I believe they're outscoring their opponents right now 52-3 in the NCAA tournament heading into the College World Series. Just some of your takeaways from their matchups against UCF.
Well, and I don't know necessarily that on the podcast, I really necessarily got the chance to talk a ton about them advancing out of the regionals either. So just in general, combining the two regionals and super regionals, Oklahoma, we knew would be frustrated by losing that Big 12 tournament championship to Oklahoma State. We knew that based on what Oklahoma softball coach Patty Gasso said, head softball coach Patty Gasso said, that her team's pretty good. Program's pretty good at responding to losses. And we've seen that certainly from Oklahoma. If you had concerns about maybe what Oklahoma had in the circle minus Jordy Ball, Hope Troutwine and Nicole May flex their muscle in this super regional versus UCF. Yeah. You mentioned what Hope Troutwine accomplished. Nicole May pitches 7 innings of 3 hit ball, just the 1 earned run versus a UCF team that can score runs against teams that aren't named Oklahoma. Meanwhile, the Sooners just pounding out 12 hits in the super regional win, the second one of the two to advance into the Women's College World Series. It's that time on the calendar, right? It's that time of the year, an annual tradition for Oklahoma where they advance out of the super regional into another Women's College World Series. They're dominant. They're now, because of what's happened around them, John, with Florida State and others getting bounced out of this tournament. Arkansas, I thought, was a team that really had a chance potentially to challenge Oklahoma at the Women's College World Series. And now they're out of this thing too. Texas winds up coming out of that super regional. So just looking at what happened in some other places, I think is really great news for Oklahoma and sets them up to be an even bigger favorite than we thought they were going to be in Oklahoma City.
They were just on fire again. So now they have 3 players, Jocelyn Allo, Tiara Jennings, and Grace Lyons, with more than 20 home runs. They're the only team in the country with 3 players in the 20 home run club. Arkansas was the only other team with multiple players in the 20 home run club. And Grace Lyons, she had 2 home runs, 4 RBI in the win over UCF on Saturday. And you mentioned Nicole May. You know, she's only allowed 1 earned run in her 3 appearances so far in the postseason. And Hope Troutwine, she allowed the 2 runs to the Aggies in the regional, and then was immaculate against UCF on Friday night. So you mentioned, not having Jordy Ball, and I think that's been huge for the Sooners to be able to get those performances out of Nicole May and Hope Troutwine, to be able to extend Jordy Ball's rest time and her recovery to get her ready for the College World Series. And I'm sure that's been Patty Gass's plan all along, just to say, hey, we believe in Nicole May, we believe in Hope Troutwine, and we believe that they're going to be able to win us some games. And she's proved that out. Joining Oklahoma in the Women's College World Series, you got Oklahoma State and Texas, Arizona, Oregon State, and UCLA, as well as, they didn't update do you have the bracket in front of you? I'm trying to find it. I thought I had it, but I don't have it.
I do not. I know that obviously Northwestern and Arizona State were battling to advance to determine who was going to play Oklahoma, and I believe we know the time on that game too, between Oklahoma and whoever they'll face in that first round. It'll be the first game of the tournament, I believe, if I've got that right. Give me 2 seconds. I'll have it for us here.
Yeah, where is it? I just have the regionals. Sporting News doesn't have it.
And I think they were playing. Well, I think it's might be ongoing as we're taping. I don't know that that final bid has been punched.
So Florida advanced. They beat Virginia Tech. So Florida being the one. So 9 SEC teams made the NCAA tournament. Florida is the only one that advanced to the College World Series. Arkansas was the other one that had a chance, and they got bounced by Texas. Whereas the Big 12 had 3 teams make it to the NCAA tournament, and all 3 will be going to the Women's College World Series. So I joked the other day on Twitter on the Locked On Sooners account that perhaps it was softball that was the reason that Oklahoma and Texas were being lured to the SEC and not for football because of their success so far in the NCAA tournament. And you might be right. The only other one left is, it's not going to be over for a while. But Arizona State and Northwestern, they're playing their 3rd game. They had a late start as well. And if Arizona State's able to make it, that would be pretty incredible. Was it Arizona State or Arizona? Yeah, Arizona State.
And would probably be good news for Oklahoma, as Northwestern all year long has seemingly been the Big Ten's best team. So I think that could be viewed as good news for Oklahoma. Either way, of course, it's going to be a challenge for the Sooners. But again, I think they're the favorite going into the Women's College World Series. Of course, that's probably a no-brainer for most everybody out there. You're the number 1 overall seed going into the tournament. You're the defending national champion. But, we're not too far removed from losing that Big 12 tournament championship versus Oklahoma State, and there being a few questions about, okay, the pitching's been great, even outside of Jordy Ball all season long, but now how will Hope Troutwine, how will Nicole May handle the bulk of the duty in the circle? And obviously both have been fantastic for the Sooners throughout their march to the Women's College World Series. And whether Jordy Ball is able to go, I do think that she'll be available in some capacity in the Women's College World Series. I don't have that on any sourced type of information. That's just a gut feel. But even if she's not able to, I like where Oklahoma's at heading into the Women's College World Series, and I think they're about to win another national championship, man.
Yeah, and one note just that was really cool from the game on Saturday is Jocelyn Alo finished her career at Marita Hines Field the way she started it, and that was with a home run. So just a really cool storybook ending to her last game in Norman. But we have Northwestern and Arizona State. They're pretty close. It's 6-5. Northwestern leads by a run in the top of the 7th. Arizona State's got them with 2 outs. Although Northwestern is threatening, they got 2 runners on as we speak with 2 outs. So Arizona State really trying to keep this close so that they have one more shot in the bottom of the 7th. So that'll be a game to continue to monitor. We got to talk Big 12 baseball. Oklahoma continued their hot run. They finished the Big 12 regular season with 5 series wins, including one over Texas Tech, one over TCU, who ended up being the regular season champion. And then Oklahoma seemingly just breezed through the Big 12 tournament as well, winning their 3 games, ultimately with an 8-1 win over Texas in the Big 12 tournament final to be the Big 12 tournament champions for the first time since 2013. Cade Horton pitched 5 1/3, really strong innings, had 9 strikeouts to pick up the win. And the Oklahoma Sooners erupted for 8 runs in the 3rd inning after Texas took a 1-0 lead in the 1st. And they got a little bit from everybody. They got a double or 2 RBIs from Tanner Treadway. They got a 3-run home run from Jimmy Crooks. And then the bullpen, which has kind of been maligned for the Sooners for much of this season, they went 4 2/3 and didn't give up a single run. Chaz Martinez was perfect, and they themselves had 7 strikeouts.
Yeah, great to see that. This team's on a roll. I think it's a real shame coming out of this Big 12 tournament championship for Oklahoma that they were not announced as one of the host sides. I think Oklahoma earned that right to be a host side. Again, I'm not looking at the updated RPI right now. I know it was 24 going into the Big 12 tournament championship game against Texas. It's clearly gone up a little bit even from that. So there's an argument to be made that maybe OU doesn't have the RPI that you would want from a team hosting an NCAA regional. It's not necessarily top 16 for OU. I just think, a couple of things. Number one, I think the Big 12 itself did Oklahoma a big time disservice here by not moving this game up. they didn't set it up for the NCAA tournament selection committee to really put a lot of weight into what happened from Globe Life Field, right? They kind of already had all of their regional hosts announced before this thing really went final for Oklahoma. Sure, they had an idea that it was trending in Oklahoma's direction, but did the tournament committee really even take it into consideration? Doesn't seem like it, obviously, because Oklahoma doesn't wind up hosting, but I really think they got the short end of the straw here. I think Oklahoma should be hosting. I'm a big time believer, John, that I believe in the RPI. There's some that adamantly oppose the RPI. I believe it's an important tool, and it's a tool that we should use. And in a lot of cases, it does make sense to use it in terms of differentiating different resumes. But to me, it shouldn't be the end-all, be-all. When you end the season the way that Oklahoma did, and you were that close to a Big 12 regular season championship, and then you go out and breeze your way through the Big 12 tournament championship, I just think the track record over the final month and change of the season for Oklahoma is that they're one of the 16 best teams in America. So I just don't know how you could argue against that for Oklahoma. But, hey, we'll see what their draw is coming up, and hopefully they can keep this hot streak going because they are absolutely on fire right now. Jimmy Crooks was awesome. Peyton Graham had a bunch of nice plays in this game. So it was fun to watch them do what they did to Texas. And the horns down at the end was just incredible. And totally weak in the Big 12 conference as well in that regard, too, for them to tweet that highlight out and then completely remove the horns down at the end of it. Total Big 12 move. It did par for the course for the league. See you later, Big 12.
Yeah, the SEC would never. I mean, come on. You gotta leave the horns down. Let's embrace rivalry. Let's embrace the horns down. It's super fun. Texas fans on my timeline, they even are opposed to the Big 12's censorship of the horns down. The penalizing of the horns down. UT fans don't like it either. So why should the Big 12 care? But no, it is. I get that Oklahoma had some tough losses during the regular season. The one to Oral Roberts just a few weeks back after they had a big series win, that 18-0 loss. I mean, that could just be chalked up to just not playing your guys. Like you're not going in there necessarily winning. You're just trying to rest some guys. You got this midweeker. But yeah, I think what this is going to do is it's going to keep Oklahoma with that chip on their shoulder. You know, they've really had to battle to get to where they are over the last couple months. They had to battle through, some bullpen stuff. They had some closer than what it looked like wins in the Big 12 tournament. I mean, they were well ahead and teams kind of stormed back to make things a game. But then against Texas, it was just all she wrote after that third inning. Texas didn't have a chance. And so I would have liked to see them get that regional opportunity to host. But at the same time, I think this is going to also play into their benefit a little bit in that it's going to keep them on edge. Like they have to keep playing with that same edge, that same fire. They cannot let up one instant. And that's not to say they would have, but when you play at home, you're a little more comfortable. When you got to go on the road and you got to win several games to get out of the regional on the road, you got to be on guard. You cannot let up for one single pitch. And I'm still pretty confident in what Oklahoma's going to be able to do. This just might be the team that's going to get them to the College World Series.
Yeah, we'll see. Obviously, the way they've been clicking, pitching, hitting, just everything that Oklahoma's been doing, those 5 series we talked about, and then in this Big 12 tournament run, they look like for the first time since a couple of years ago during the COVID year where they had all that great pitching, looked like they were primed to perhaps make a regional hosting bid that year and perhaps a really nice postseason push. This is one of Skip Johnson's best teams. I think that much is obvious with the way they've closed the season. Just one parting thought here for us. I mean, if what Oklahoma did to close the season isn't good enough to host, then I'm sorry. There's no reason to be playing the Big 12 tournament. It's a waste of everybody's time. I get that there's some other bids out there. For example, Michigan in the Big 10, they had to win a couple of times. They had to win a couple of times on the final day of that tournament to grab that automatic bid, and they weren't getting in without it. So there is that portion of it. But, man, I mean, if you're not really going to use the tournament champions to help determine seeding and hosting, then why are we doing it that way?
Yeah, well, and So Oklahoma State and Texas tied with Oklahoma, but Oklahoma wins the regular season title. And I mean, I didn't see where TCU hosted. Did I miss that? Are they hosting a regional? Because I didn't see their name on the list either.
I do not know off the top of my head here. I don't have the list of NCAA tournament hosts in front of me.
Yeah. TCU, the Big 12's regular season winner, is also not hosting. Texas Tech, who was one of the highest ranked teams, if you look at the top 25s, also not hosting. So it just doesn't make any kind of sense that your Big 12 regular season winner isn't hosting, your tournament winner isn't hosting, your highest ranked team isn't hosting. So what are we doing here? What's the NCAA committee doing? Are we just solely basing it on the analytics and RPI? We're not using the results on the field at the end of the season, the standings to determine who should be hosting a regional? Like, it just doesn't make any kind of sense to me.
Or, I don't know what the financial scale of a regional looks like, what type of amount the NCAA would get from that. But I can guarantee you that both Austin and Stillwater are going to be packed houses and sellouts throughout those regionals. So if that portion of it factors in a little bit, it just might. But really, I'm with you. And that's not to say that Oklahoma State or Texas shouldn't be hosting. But when you've got a tournament champion in Oklahoma and a regular season champion at TCU and neither one's hosting, make that make sense. It doesn't.
It absolutely doesn't. But Oklahoma's going to go into it with that chip on their shoulder, going to continue to battle, and we're going to feel good about where they land. We'll find out where they land on Monday, and we're going to feel good wherever they go. So Oklahoma baseball trending up, Oklahoma softball trending up, Oklahoma football 3 months away but trending up. It's going to be a lot of fun this year. It's been a great 2021-2022 school year for Oklahoma Sooners athletics, and it's going to continue to do that.
You mentioned golf trending up.
Yeah, as well. So that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thank you so much for tuning in and making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Make sure you follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Sooners, on Facebook, Locked On Sooners Podcast. Follow Josh on Twitter as well at Josh on Ref, and you can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. Interact with us. Let us know how you feel about the show. Go leave a 5-star rating over on Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. But until tomorrow, he's Josh. I'm John. Boomer Sooner.